Emperor of the Gaels is a game where you are trying to take over areas, you are trying to put out your settlements, you are trying to get food to your people, build towers and become, well, the Emperor of the Gaels. At the same time as you are trying to defend your land from the Viking raiders, but also from the other clans. This game is coming to Kickstarter this year and I have the privilege to have it in my studio. In this video I will show you how to set up this game and how to play the game. But please note that what I have here in front of me is a prototype and some things might look a little bit different when you get the finished game. But this will give you an idea of how the game will look and how it will play. So let's take a look at this. At the start of setup, we start with putting the big map in the center of the table. Next we need to place out the action cards on the side of the map. If you are 4 or more players, you should use all the tiles. But if you are less than 4 players, you should remove the ones that has a +4 in the bottom right corner. Under Anno Domini, we need to place the year tiles with 1011 on the top. We place the calendar marker above the first event on the calendar. And we need to fill the trade table with resources. And at the start of the game, it looks like this. The top row is empty. The second row has 1 metal and 1 stone. The third row has 1 wood and 1 textile. And the fourth row has 1 food. These resource tokens have 3 different sizes, and make sure that you put out the one with the middle size at the start of the game. Next to the board we put all the money, victory point tokens, resource tokens, but also the animals so all players can reach them easily. We need to sort the development cards in their category. There are 4 different development cards. We have military, countryside, village, and lastly clan. We also need to place the different die next to the table. On these 2 locations, Dyflin and Vesafjord, we need to put out 6 Viking quarters and 1 Viking warrior in the center. We also need to place out the Viking longship at the start of the Viking longship track. The rest of the Viking warriors and their chieftains goes next to the table for now. We place the 4 take tribute cards above the other action cards. Then we need to take all the area tokens looking like this and put them in the little bag next to the action cards. And now the players also need to take 1 player mat but also 1 provincial king sheet. And these are picked at random. On these king sheets you also have a special ability and you might want to keep this in mind as it might be helpful. Dalkais needs to be a part of the game, because whoever gets this player mat becomes the first player, and also becomes the one that kind of manages some parts of the game. Whenever a player is not supposed to roll the die, when we for example roll for foragers that comes into our land, well this player will roll the dice. Or whenever we move the little event token around here, it will also be this player that keeps this order. When we have received our clan, we need to take all the little pieces that belong to our clan in the correct color. But we also need to place out some pieces on the game board. Next we need to look on our provincial king sheet to see what we can place out on the map. In this case here, we get to place out 1 chieftain in our monastic area. To place out 1 ship anywhere in the sea. And adjacent to our monastic area, we get to place out 1 forest with 1 warrior, 1 forest with 1 worker, and 1 cattle with 1 worker. And you can place out these any way you want to, as long as they are next to your monastic area. Next we need to look in the top right corner of our provincial king sheet to see which resources we start with in the game. These are then placed on our player map. The different resources in this game are food, textile, wood, stone, and metal. And some silver, of course. Then we need to look in the bottom right corner of our provincial king sheet to see which starting development cards we get. These are then placed faced up next to our player area. Next we need to shuffle each of the 4 different development card piles and then take the top card and place it face up on the board. And finally, each player places their little trader meeple on the color corresponding to their meeple. So we have done the setup and we are ready to start playing the game. This game plays out during years. In the game, not in real life, because that would be a long game. During each year, we will go through the 4 different seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. During each of these seasons, we will have different events. And these are the events that will pretty much tell us what we can or cannot do during our turn. A lot of these events can be done simultaneously around the players, so we do not have to wait that much on each other. And whoever is the High King is the one that will guide us through these different events. But it's also this player that will roll in during the trade phase, for example, or roll for the Vikings if they fight. Now each year starts in spring, and we are going to take a look at these events soon. But first, let's take a look at the development cards. These development cards represent, well, developments that you have in your clan, and they will give you different assets and skills that you can use. There are 4 different groups of development cards. We have clan, village, countryside, and military. These cards are always placed face up on the table in front of you, so all players can see what you have developed. Here we can see the name of our development card. And in the top right corner we can see some symbols. These are the card's tags, and there are 6 different tags in this game. In the top left corner we can see another symbol, and this is the symbol that tells you when you can use this development. Some of these are activated during an event, like this symbol here, and some of these are activated during an action, like this symbol here. Whenever we are out on a matching symbol on the event calendar, we can activate this development that matches that symbol. Some of these development cards will have the military symbol, and these are only valid for war bands and cannot be used in any other way, unless the cards themselves says something else. Cards that has this error symbol here means that they can only be used once, and then you need to trash them. On the back side of the card we can see some resource symbols, and this is what we need to pay when we want to buy this card. So in this case here we would need to pay 2 stone and 1 metal. Now that we know how the development cards works, it's time for us to take a look at the gameplay and the actual event calendar. We also have these action tokens, but I will tell you more about these in a bit. Let's start with looking at the event calendar. When you go through the events, you can use the quick reference guide to easily get an overview of the different actions, but also the different events. The first event we have is Sowing, and Sowing may be performed in farmlands, where your clan has at least 1 settlement. Each settlement in a farmland has 1 field, which may be sown with grain or with flax. By placing a textile or a food resource token in that area, the seed is taken from the player mat. The next event is milking. For each of your cattle out on the game board, your clan will receive 1 food, and these are placed on your player board. The next event we're going to take a look at is the Vikings, the plague of the lands. First we need to mobilize the Vikings, and we will do this for each town. Whoever is the High King will need to roll this die. As you can see, there are a lot of directions on the die, and whatever direction we get will tell us where we should put out a Viking. So if we, for example, get south, like in this case, we would need to put out a Viking here, as this is the south direction of this town. If there would have been a clan here, the Vikings would instead mobilize within the town. If the Vikings ever mobilize in water, we instead put out a chieftain in the town. This represents them coming with the longship and coming out on the game board. If all the chieftains should already be on the game board, well, we will put out a warrior instead. When this happens, we also need to move the longship 1 step. Whenever the longship is moved to the final space, well, all of the Vikings are going out raiding. And you can see how many ships they are sending by looking at this tile. And it all depends on which year you are in. In the first year they only send 3. But in the last year, well, they will send 8. And remember that this is for 3 players. If you are playing with 4 players, you should use the other side. And now you need to choose how you want to deal with these damn Vikings. You could choose to just pay them 15 silver and just get rid of them. If you want to do this, well, simply take the silver up in your hand and wait for the other players to do their decision. But you need to hide the money in your hand, so the other players won't know which choice you have chosen. Because the other decision that you can make is to send out your little ships. If you choose to send these out, well, they will join a fleet of the other player's ships to take care of the Vikings. The problem here is that you do not know how many other players choosing this alternative. Because you need to take the ships that you want to send in one hand and the ships that you want to keep at home defending your base in the other hand. Now we wait for the other players to make their choices, and then we show it simultaneously. When we know how many ships the different players have sent out, it's time to deal out some victory points. Whoever sent out the most ships gets 3 victory points. Number 2 would get 2, and number 3 or 4 would get 1. If any player ever sent out the same amount of ships, well, then they would simply divide the victory points between themselves. Rounded up. Now we also need to see if we manage to send out more ships than the Vikings did. If we send out more ships than the Vikings, well, then the Vikings are defeated and they go back to wherever they came from and no plunder will trigger. But if they had more ships than us, well, plunder will trigger. But first we also need to see how many ships, if any, we lost. So now we need to roll 2 battle die. And we need to count the swords result. If we get 2 swords, well, they count as 1 hit. Meaning that if we get 1 hit, each clan will lose 1 ship per hit. Meaning 1 ship per every 2 swords. But it's only the ships that was on this expedition that will be affected, not the ones that are home defending your base. And now it is the plundering part. Remember, Vikings, they need to plunder because that's what they do. Again, whoever have the high chief here in front of them gets to roll for the Viking. And he takes this black d6 die and makes the roll. Each player now gets to roll some green die. How many they get to roll depends on how many they have at home. If they don't have any ships home, well, they don't roll anything. Once we have done this, each player now, by themselves, gets to choose which die results they would like to face. And you need to choose 2 of these die results to face. And you can only choose your own green die. So you cannot choose the result of another player. And of course you would need to choose one of the Viking dies. Now, depending on which result we have here, different things will happen. But let's say that this player rolled 1 and the Viking rolls 4 and 2. The 1 result means that nothing happens. So of course the player would choose this result. And the higher value you face on the dice, well, the worse it will get. So this player here would of course choose 1 and 2 as their opponent. On the board itself you can see an overview of the different results and how they will affect you. When the plunder ship is done, the longship goes back to the starting position. So now the Vikings have plundered and that should be it, right? Well, no, because now they move and they battle as well. So whenever we have a chieftain and 0 or more warriors beneath them, we have a warband. And the first thing we need to do during the battle and move steps with the Vikings is to distribute the warriors beneath them if 1 or more warrior band is standing in the same area. And we need to divide these warriors between these 2 chieftains as even as possible. Now we have 3 in each. And we also have 2 very happy chieftains. Next, we again need to roll this direction die to see which direction they will take. And whoever has the High King will determine which warrior band that will move first. Here we can see that we got south, meaning that this one might move in this direction here. And if the Viking warbands ever moves into the same area as a clan's warband, well, a battle will start. Then we need to roll again for the next one. And now we got southeast, which means that this Viking here will move back into town. Now as we can see, we also have some circles underneath the letters. These are if the warbands should land out in water. If that happens, we should simply move the warband 1 step in the direction of the error until they reach land again. And on some of these we also have a line. This means that they would simply move in the opposite direction. So that was the Viking event out on the board. Next we have the fair event, which is split up into 3 different steps. When you do the fair event, there is a little reference sheet out on the board itself next to the trading table that takes you through the event and the different steps. During the year there's 2 different events, one in the summer and one in the winter. If we are on the one in the summer, we will get some new development cards. In turn order, each clan gets to choose if they want to pick one of the face-up development cards or one of the face-down development cards. And they get this one for free. If you manage to get a development card with the fair symbol, you can actually use that right away. But if this would have been the winter fair, well, we would have need to clear and replenish the market. The next step in the fair is where we get to trade, and we will do this both in the summer and in the winter. And here we will be using the trade table. Now, the trade table consists of different columns. Each column represents 1 resource. The value above the resource is the buy value, and the value below the resource is the sell value. Now, before we get to do our trading, the foragers that comes to our lovely land gets to trade first, and they might mess up the market quite a bit for you. So this step represents foragers coming to our lands to buy and sell goods. And this might affect the value of the resources. Whoever is the High King gets to roll 1 black and 1 green die. If we would roll a number 1, well, nothing will happen. But everything above 2 to 6 will affect the market. Now, if we start by looking at the green die, we can see that we got a number 6. Meaning that a resource over here will be affected. As we can see here, the green die is at the bottom. Meaning that the price for metal, in this case, will go down. And it will go down by 2. The black die, on the other hand, is on the top. Meaning that now we need to raise whatever resource that corresponds to the result. In this case, food. So we will need to move food up 2 steps. So now the foragers have done their trade, and like I told you, this might affect the market quite a lot. So if you wanted to buy something for a good price, well, now it might be changed actually. But when they are done with their trading, it's time for the clans to finally get some goods or sell some goods. Because when the clans get to trade, it's split up into 2 phases. First we sell and then we buy. Whenever you buy 1 to 5 resources, the value would go up. But if you buy more than 5, meaning 6 to 10 resources, well, the value would go up by 2 instead. This works in a way that each little player takes their little market meeple and place it out underneath whatever they would like to sell. If there's only 1 meeple at the column where you would like to sell, well, then you can just go ahead and sell. But if there are 2 meeples standing there, it will be resolved in player order. And whoever is the High King, well, of course, always get to go first. Damn kings. And remember that whenever we sell 1 to 5 resources, it's go down 1 step. If we would sell 6 to 10, well, it would move 2 steps instead. Once we have done the sell step, well, we go into the buy step, and this is done the same way. If you are alone at one column, well, go ahead. If there is a queue, well, we go in turn order. And instead of moving the little resource cube down, we now move it up instead. The third and final step of the fair event is where we can buy livestock, or ships, or maybe arms to the people. We can really buy a lot of different things, and what you can buy and how much it will cost you can be seen on your player board. If you, for example, want to buy some livestock, well, it will cost you 10 silver. If you want to sell some livestock, well, you would get 5 silver per animal. A boat would cost you 25, and so on. The next event we have is Harvest, and this is where we get to enjoy what we have sown in the spring. When we harvest, whoever is the High King gets to roll the harvest die, and whatever result we get is what we get to harvest. If you have any development cards with the harvest symbol, well, now you can use them. If you want to, that is. The next one is Livestock Husbandry, and this one is split up into 4 different steps. The first step here is where we shave our sheeps, and you will get 3 of these textile tokens per sheep that you have out on the map. Meaning that if you have 3 sheep, well, you would get 9 textile tokens, and these are placed on your player board. You will receive 1 new cattle for every cattle you have out on the game board, but you will receive 2 sheep for each sheep you have out on the board. So now that we have reproduced, we can actually move our animals around out on the map, but we need to move them to an unexplored area. Plus, we need to have at least 1 worker with us with our animals. We can't just leave them alone, right? And you can only have a maximum of 2 animals in each area. And you can only have a maximum of 2 animals on your player board. So the animals that you did not manage to move will be slaughtered. For each slaughtered sheep, you will get 1 food. But for each slaughtered cattle, you will get 2 food. When we come to this symbol down here, well, it's time for us to start over a new year. And we would do this by simply flipping the little token over, indicating that now we are in year 1012 instead. And of course move the token back to spring. Any players that have taken tribute places their tile back on the table. But we actually have 1 more event left on the event calendar, and this is the action event. And this is where we get to do actions, and there are quite few of these as well. When we end up on the action event, each clan in turn order chooses 1 action card that they would like to use. On the backside of all of these little action tokens, you can actually see what you can or cannot do. So if you're ever in doubt, well, just read the back. If you choose to, for example, take the crown, well, then you would take the High King token and place it in front of your player area. And now you are the High King instead. If you choose to take the develop token here, well, then you get to take either a face up development cards or a face down development card. But don't forget to pay the price. The battle and move would let you, well, battle and move. You need to consume 1 food per warrior and chieftain that are a part of the battle. And you can also attack areas that are next to your warband, except monistic areas. And an area can only be attacked once during the same battle and move action. And it's only a warband that may attack. Meaning that a simple warrior like this one here, without the chieftain, cannot attack. So before we actually start our battle, we need to say which units that will participate in this battle. And then we also need to choose any development cards, if we have any that we would like to use during this battle. The cards that needs to be used before the battles will need to be played now. But the incident cards can be used later during the battle. But the cards that you choose now needs to be played during this battle. But you can play them in any order you would like to play them. So before the battle starts, we might want to use a herd of horses, which will reduce the food that we need to pay for the units by 2. But before the first attack, we might want to use skimmers and bowmen. And again, you can choose to use these any way you want to, but these ones are used before the first attack. Now, during the attack, you might want to use staff slings, for example. Again, we can see here, this is during attack number 1. So when we play this card, we would need to resolve the card. And this card here, staff slings, would let you change the die result of any die you have rolled. And when we enter attack number 2, we could choose to use Svinflinkling. This will let you re-roll up to 2 different battle die of your choice, or your opponent's. And then we had the card with the incident symbol. Well, these cards can be used when you feel like you really need them. So when we know how many units that are participating in this battle, which development cards we would like to play, well, it's time for us to actually start the battle itself. And we will do this by rolling battle die. When a clan is fighting the Vikings, they roll the green die, and the Vikings roll the black die. But when a clan faces another clan, one clan would need to use the green die and the other one would need to use the black die. And you will get 1 die per unit with a maximum of 4 die. Meaning that even if you have 10 units in the battle, you can have a maximum of 4 die. Unless a development card says anything else, because then it will change. But it's not just the units we need to add into this result, we also need to add in any defending structures. Like this tower here, for example. Each level of this structure would represent 1 die. When we know how many die we can roll, well, we roll the die to see which type of results we get. And just like before, every 2 swords counts as a hit. But what do the other results on these die mean? Well, we have 1 result with 2 swords. So this here would be a hit. We have results with only 1 swords, which means that this one would of course need the company of another die to be able to count as a hit. Then we have this error here, which stands for root. And the last one here, the circle, well, this one is a miss. If we manage to get a hit, well, then we get to remove warrior tokens from our opponents. And we need to remove the tokens before we remove the chieftain, because they are the last ones that are taken out. When a clan attack another clan, the clans themselves choose which units or structures to remove. But warriors must always be removed before chieftains here as well. Roots will force your opponents to move. Or if the Vikings get a root, well, they will force your units to move. They need to move to an adjacent area that does not contain a warrior that are participating in the battle, and it can't be adjacent to the opponent either. And you always need to move the warriors first, and then the chieftains. If you would root a worker and an animal, the worker can take the animal with them and move to an area where they can be placed. After the first attack, if there's still any warbands left in this battle, we would need to do the second attack as well. A second attack is performed in the same way as the first attack, but the second attack is not optional. If there is an attacking warband left, the second attack is always performed. And now when the battle is over, we need to see if we have managed to get any victory points. We would get 1 victory point for each defeated Viking warrior, but we would get 2 for each defeated chieftain. If we have managed to defeat one of the Vikings' quarters, we would get 3 victory points. But if you have defeated another clan's structure, you actually lose 2 victory points. Lastly, we get to plunder, and we do this by rolling 1 die for every Viking chieftain or Viking structure that we have managed to defeat. Once we have rolled the die, we again need to look at our player mat to see what the resolve gave us. But you could also use the battle and move action to simply just move. All movements are made after the battle, and you need to consume one food for each of your chieftains, warriors, or workers. Chieftain, warbands, and workers may move to adjacent areas. And you may move to any number of continuous areas where you have structures. And an area may be passed several times. And it's not allowed to move into an area where an opponent is present. There is no limit for the numbers of units that you can have per area. But the warriors, they can only move together with a chieftain. They can never move on their own. But remember that a chieftain can move through areas and pick up or drop off warriors on their way. Warriors and chieftains that perform battle during the current battle and move action may also move during the move part of the action. A worker with an animal may move to an adjacent unexplored area, and the animals may be distributed any way they are allowed without any food consumption. Again, you may move your animals to your player mat, but you can only have a maximum of 2 animals there, remember? And you can have a maximum of 2 animals with workers per area. And you need 1 animal per worker. If you want to raid, well then you would need to choose 1 or more of your ships, consume 1 food per ship you choose, and roll 1 die per ship participating in the raid, and see what result you got. But you can only lose a maximum of 1 ship. If you choose to produce, you can produce in either your forests or your quarries or your mines, but you need to have workers or settlements in the area to be able to produce. A settlement will produce 2 resources for the consumption of 1 food. But the workers will produce even if there are no settlements in the area, and they do not consume any food. You can have any number of workers in an area with a production, and all of them may produce. If you choose to hunt and fish, you hunt and fish. And you will receive 2 foods even if you do not have any ships or claimed forests. But if you also have ships and claimed forests out on the board, well then you would get 1 food for each of those as well. And then we have explore. This is where you get to explore and widen your areas that you claim. And you do this by drawing a little token from this bag. Whatever token you get up, well, you can place this token in an area adjacent to the ones that you have already claimed. The build action would let you build a tower level on your tower, a settlement out on the map, or a ship out in the water. And you can see the costs of building this on your player board. This is the cost for ships, settlements, and the different levels of the towers. And lastly, we can choose to take tribute. But you can only do this once a year. So once you have done tribute, well, you need to place it in front of you just as a reminder that you have already done it this year. But what will this give you? Well, this will give you 5 silver, 1 resource of any type, 1 silver per worker in the monistic area, and 5 silver per tower level that you have. And that's the way the game goes on, until one of these things happens. Either if a player managed to completely build up their tower, or if one of the clan's monistic areas are taken out by the Vikings, or if one player have managed to completely take out one of the Viking towns. Then the game would also end. Or if we end up on the last year in this game, meaning 1014. And now it's time for us to calculate some victory points to see who have won. Any claimed area, including the monistic area, would give you 1 victory point. Each settlement would also give you 1 victory point, and each of your ships would give you 1 victory point. Animals out on the board, not the player mat, would give you 1 victory point. But you would also receive points for the levels on your tower. If you have managed to do 1 level, you get 1 victory point. 2 levels, 3 victory points. 3 levels, 6 victory points. 4 levels, 15 victory points. And lastly, 5 levels, you would receive 30 victory points. You get 1 victory point for every 25 silver. Some of the development cards would also give you victory points at the end of the game. And then you would also need to add up the victory points that you have received on your player map throughout the game. But don't forget the minus ones. Whoever gets the most scores becomes Emperor of the Gaels and becomes the one true king of these lands. Now, this is how you play this game, and it might seem like a lot of things going on. But keep in mind that a lot of these actions that happens during the events are played out simultaneously, meaning that there are not that much waiting in this game as you would expect. And yes, there are conflicts out on the board, but it's quite friendly competition. Because remember, when you defeat any of the enemy's structures, well, you actually lose victory points. Unless it's the Vikings, of course, we don't like them. The rules themselves are actually not that complicated. It's just that there are quite a few steps during the different actions. In battle, one comes first, and the trading phase, and so on. And once you have gone through these different actions once or twice, well, it really becomes second nature. I really enjoyed this game. I like the artwork of it. I mean, this is old school art, but it fits this game just good. And the game itself flows quite nice. There's always something to do out on the map, and there's a lot of strategic choices for you to do. You do not have that much of a competition, which I like. I mean, sometimes it's almost like a little co-op game because you are fighting the Vikings together, and not that much the other players. I mean, yes, you do fight over areas, and every now and then you will probably take out one of the other clans, warriors or workers, and so on. But it's not the big thing in this game. The big thing here is really to develop your clan, building your towers, expanding your areas, get the resources flowing good, get out the structures, which I think is a quite nice balance. So that, my friend, was Emperor of the Gaels. This is a highly strategic Euro game where you really get to go out, explore new areas, build new settlements, build towers, get workers, and so on. There's so much things going on in this game. I really enjoyed it. I played it on 3 players and I think it worked quite well. I'm betting that 4 players will bring even more to the table. This game is quite neat. If you want to know more about it, well, check out the links down in the description and it will take you straight to this game's page. As I told you in the start of the video, it is coming to Kickstarter soon, so you better keep your eyes open. If you liked my video, well, why not give me a thumbs up, maybe throw in a comment there for me, or subscribe to the channel. It gives me a smile on my lip every time I get a new subscriber. But most importantly, my friend, until next time, please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out, my friend.